Well, welcome everyone to the third in our series of spring workshops about different aspects of communicating in an election year. We're very pleased to have with us Professor Sue Ellen Christian. She is the Presidential Innovation Professor in Communication at Western Michigan University for 2021 to 2024. Her most recent book is called Everyday Media Literacy, an analog guide to your digital life. The second edition came out in 2023. She's the project co-lead on an Institute of Museum and Library Services grant to create and launch the website that's wondermedialibrary.com. And I think you'll be able to see a little bit of that coming up. This website is designed for public library use and is based on the museum exhibition that she created entitled Wonder Media, Ask the Questions. It was a 14-element interactive exhibition on media literacy and news media literacy. A former award-winning staff writer for the Chicago Tribune, Sue Ellen is the recipient of many teaching awards, including the 2016 Michigan Professor of the Year. So Sue Ellen, welcome, and we're so glad to have you. And I'm going to turn this over to you. Just if people have thoughts or questions during Sue Ellen's presentation, if you could please put them in the chat, then we'll retrieve them when it's an appropriate time and make sure she gets asked those questions. We'll probably be able to have a nice discussion afterwards. So thank you. Go ahead, Sue Ellen.
Thanks for that nice warm welcome. It's great to see everybody. I love the League of Women Voters. So first of all, thank you all for your work in your various communities. It's so important what you do. And I am sure you get discouraged and beleaguered, but just from a citizen who cares about democracy and voting rights to you all, I just want to say thank you so much for your efforts and involvement. And I'm certainly aligned with your efforts when it comes to nonpartisan information to help citizens of all stripes to exercise their rights, including the right to vote and to be informed. Could I just see a show of hands or some indication within your screens as to how, if you have participated in information or classes or reading about mis and disinformation in the past? It will help me to know where we're starting from. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. I really want to make this value added for your time. So I don't mind at all if somebody wants to interrupt and ask a question, or if this is something that is feeling familiar and you were hoping to get to the next step. Just ask the question. This is your time and it's for your edification. And I really want to try and meet folks' needs where you're at. So that said, I will share my screen. Unless anyone has anything off the bat that they want to ask or say on behalf of the group, we run an open classroom here, folks. So please feel free to join in, and let's see, here we go. How's it looking? Pretty good? All right. You just see my PowerPoint, correct?
Yep, it looks good.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So we're all inundated with information all the time. And the advent of the smartphone means that literally we wake up with information and we go to bed with it. One of the realities of this new era that we're in is that we get information that's not correct. I'd like to have you just take a look at this and tell me what your initial reaction is in terms of emotion to this slide. It's a It's a quote unquote news story. You could just call out just the one word reaction of how it makes you feel.
Disbelief.
Anger.
Well, I'm not sure that the words match the picture.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of revolting.
Mm-hmm.
Chaos.
Chaos, revolting, disbelief.
Mhm.
I would read more of it though.
Yeah, you would read more of it
Mhm.
Yeah.
because
Because it seems like there's a huge story there just looking at the pictures.
mm-hmm. So let's just pause for a minute and notice a few things that it is a looking at the headline, there's specificity, which makes us more apt to think that it's correct whenever we see details. It feels more evidence-based. And we also see a really vivid image, which is upsetting. It might be confusing. It might be compelling. There's lots of different words we could give it in terms of its emotional valence. And then let's look at the word choice of the headline: treason,
Mhm.
secretly, illegal immigrants. So some bombastic language there that's
Mhm.
definitely hyperbolic. And just to set the record, oops, I'm really sorry. To set the record straight, this is incorrect information. What we're seeing, look at Sarah Huckabee Sanders' tweet, and she's reiterating this misinformation. What we have is a correction of it. This is categorically false from the White House spokesperson. Now, this is how people get confused, discouraged about wading through what's real, what's not. We might just see Sarah Huckabee Sanders post and not necessarily see the correction or the writing of the truth by the White House spokesperson. Looking at another example, this is a news story. It's published in a news outlet called Real Raw News. It's not your, likely not on your common typical news feed. But thousands of people saw it. And once again, some of the same characteristics that we saw on the other are there. Kind of a provocative headline, a strong image, detail offering voters $1,000 prepaid debit cards. Snopes.com is one of the fact-checking organizations that I want you to know about and that should be handy for you. Part of your just rotation when you run into something like these last two slides I showed you. Oftentimes, if it's a national story or of import that it's gone statewide in our state, we can wait a couple hours and know probably we're going to see a fact check by one of the big fact checking organizations like Snopes.com. PolitiFact is another one. Factcheck.com. There's quite a few organizations that try really hard to follow the big trending stories and let us know if it's partially correct, or in this case, satire. The news organization actually says on its about page that some of its content is meant to be humorous or satirical. It's easy to also miss this kind of fact check and believe it and share it with others. So let's just make sure we have some of our, oh, question? Oh, okay. Let's make sure we have our terms, set and that we all share the same vocabulary. Disinformation is purposely deceptive. It's created to fool people. It's created for a variety of reasons, which we'll explore, because it's important to know why it was created. And then misinformation is when it comes along our feed or it pops up in a social media post, and we have that strong emotional reaction that sometimes leads us to share something that is misleading or completely false. We don't mean to. Many folks share information thinking that they're being helpful or altruistic, or that they are speaking to their tribe, as it were, and not understanding that what they're sharing is disinformation. Why do they share it? There's a whole world on social media in particular, and this can be Facebook, X, which was Twitter. It can even be, let's expand a little bit to if you're in private chats with friends or in group chats with others that you know through the neighborhood. So it could be a next door site. Let's think widely about how we share information. And people share information, one, because they think they're being helpful. They think it's correct. Another reason is to signal to folks who they belong to and who they don't belong to, who they don't want to be part of. So the partisanship, and that can be beyond ideology or political parties. There's lots of reasons and lots of ways to be partisan, but with our particular focus on elections, let's consider it political parties in particular. Also to build social capital, meaning that they know that others in their group will see what they posted, give it the thumbs up, also reshare it. And the number one type of information that is shared online the fastest and the farthest is information that makes people angry. So sharing this information also for folks like us can get very confusing and very chaotic. When I say folks like us, what I mean is people who are trying to consume a lot of information, who are here at a webinar like this because they are trying to get it right. And it can get really exhausting. It's one of the reasons that we're seeing such a high level of what we call news aversion. Folks just saying, I can't do this anymore. I'm just not going to look at the news. That's a really difficult scenario for our democracy, particularly in an election year, because we need to inform people. We need to let folks know what candidates stand for, when there's going to be a candidate forum, all sorts of things like that. And if people are shutting down in terms of the news, it just makes a cohesive community discussion all the harder. One of the other reasons people share misinformation and actually create disinformation is to make money. It's profitable, whether through selling ads, every time if the individual who's creating the disinformation has a website, that's a common way to boost the clicks and the likes and the shares so that they get paid more by advertisers. And we've seen again and again through bots generated largely from bad actors, folks who are making money by sowing chaos. So one of the greatest ways to do that is undermine the credibility of honest journalists. We tend to share misinformation and believe it because we're in a hurry. So we don't stop and think about it and think, really, have I seen that anywhere else? Could that possibly be correct? Wow, $1,000 in a prepaid credit card. Who's paying for that? All of those questions that you might, if you just pause. So we're in a hurry. Our emotional processing is far more impulsive than our reason-based processing, because we dislike the other side, and because we're not really sure how to check something. And so we figure, well, I'm gonna believe this because it's shown up on my feed and it was high up on my feed. It must be accurate. Or, you know, my friend who I really trust, I think she's really smart, she sent it to me. So I'm lacking the tools to really do more than just sort of take something at face value, because a friend sent it to me, or because I'm misunderstanding why things show up in my feed where they do. And what makes misinformation so slippery is because there is that element of truth. There's that element of believability. And for right or wrong, it certainly captures our imagination and gets us thinking, you know, it could be right. Glad I saw that piece of information. I better share it. So the 4-letter word I hate is fake, as in fake news. Fake news is not news at all. It's propaganda, and mis and disinformation is often called fake news. It's a way to criticize and negate information that folks don't believe in, or don't believe and don't want others to believe. So by calling a news story fake news, and it could be an honest, accurate news story, you're playing on the ideas I just mentioned about distrust in the news media, the chaotic and confusing news environment and information environment we have right now. Fake news is the shorthand way to really weaponize the idea of news in general. And it's become a term that is used when you don't agree with the information, even if it's correct. So I was creating this presentation with the League of Women Voters of Michigan in mind. I wanted to share some research-based ideas on what we do when we are confronted with someone who strongly believes misinformation. We tend to see a lot of these tips around Thanksgiving time in America, because you get seated next to the uncle who has extreme views, and you're trapped there through the whole meal. And what are you going to do, and how are you going to manage the conspiracy theories spewing forth in between the turkey and gravy and stuffing? So let's think about it. You similarly are on the front lines in many different ways in your work with the League of Women Voters. And I would love to know if you have other tips or what you have found successful. One of the things that we know from research and experience is to just stay calm. Don't take the bait. Try to quickly get through that emotional reaction of anger or shock, and keep your civility about you, particularly when it is someone that you know and you feel that they should know better. It's really difficult to not be sarcastic or mocking. How could you possibly think that? That's ridiculous. One of the most successful approaches I have found in working with folks who are very confused, but also committed to a piece of misinformation, is to lead with empathy, and to find the area that we share, which is in that Venn diagram of us and them. The area that we all share is a sense of kind of exhaustion, information exhaustion. And to acknowledge this is a confusing time. We have lots of information coming at us all the time in a lot of different channels. And it is hard to know who to trust. So let's acknowledge that this is a difficult time and circumstance, and we shouldn't be ashamed or feel embarrassed if we got something wrong. We're in this together. And trying to, I found that to be very helpful so that someone doesn't feel shame or embarrassed falling for something. Then I think of the fact sandwich. I say what's true. And depending on the individual or the circumstance, if it's an online exchange, I'll try and provide a couple very specific links. So when they're feeling calmer, or if they want to share this information, there's a place to go deeper, and there's a place to really think this through beyond just our conversation. So providing some kind of evidence is helpful. But what I'll state the facts, state what is true. As much as possible, don't repeat the falsehood, but call it into question through, how do you think that Nikki Haley's campaign got all that money in order to bribe all those voters? I'm trying to ask questions that will begin to help the person that you're speaking with ask questions as well. Like, what you're trying to demonstrate is critical thinking. And then wrap it up. You have to be patient and persistent. You are not going to solve this misinformation dilemma with anyone in one quick conversation. Particularly folks who you might be dealing with very frequently in a precinct. I work with public libraries a lot, and they'll see a lot of the same repeat individuals, patrons as it were. And so realizing we're going to do this a bite at a time. Any questions so far that you want to ask before we keep moving on?
We had.
I'd just like to make,
Oh,
okay.
sorry, go ahead.
I'd just like to make a comment. One of your slides when you had that the misinformation comes from their group and they have an emotional attachment to it. I have experienced that. It's very difficult to do. Well, you have to stay calm, but you have to also realize that even if you use logic and reasoning, that emotional tie is going to be stronger than any logic. At least I haven't found a way to break that, but I'm glad to have tips.
Yeah, I can think of a few folks I have ongoing discussions with, and I don't think that our discussions have changed their point of view at all. But I also believe it's extremely hard for, and we know this from research, that once you're part of a group, it's extremely hard to begin to question whether that group is good for you. If those are your people, it's really hard to it feels like a matter of loyalty. And we've become moved beyond just the rational decision making about policy, and it's become personal to folks. And that's, I think what you're mentioning very much makes it difficult for people to be able to step away from a belief, because it has become personal instead of intellectual. One of the things I invite people to do is to think about the gift of their attention. So another approach, as we ourselves dealing with this information chaos, but also trying to support others around us in our community. And that is to invite people to think of themselves as starting each day with an allotment of attention, which is indeed what we have. And it is not infinite, it is not endless. And to every single thing that we give our attention, it should be a thing, it should be a gift. It should be, our attention should be something that we value so much that we are going to consider before we spend a lot of time, for example, doom scrolling, and suddenly an hour's gone by. And that's an hour you're not going to get back, but also cognitive resources that you're not going to get back. What I try and tell my students is, your attention matters not only for your own, most importantly, for your own limited capacity every day. Put your attention where you are going to get the benefits that you want, where it is value added for you. And generally, your phone and your screen doesn't give you a lot back. It takes far more than it gives. And inviting people to think about, why do you think social media is free? Social media is free because you are the product. Your attention is the product. Your attention that advertisers are buying. Your data that advertisers are buying. And so if you begin to think more miserly about this, my attention matters and I'm not just going to give it to anyone, it begins to cultivate a sense, I hope, of looking for then things that are quality. If we have just a few seconds to decide, is this accurate or not? I don't have a lot of time, but I'm trying to figure out if this post, if this piece of information that's being shared with me or that maybe I'm about to share. Here is my quick tip. Count to 3. When I say count the sources, I'm particularly thinking about something that you'll see online where you can just scan. You can scroll and scan, and we're looking for a variety of viewpoints, not just one. There are several news outlets right now, one in particular that is among the fastest growing news outlets that does not feature many sources at all per story, and very often will not be from a multiple set of perspectives, credible perspectives. And what I mean by credible, for example, would be if in a story about climate change, I shouldn't, a credible perspective would not be that climate change is not happening when we know that 96% of all published and publishing scientists in peer-reviewed journals believe that climate change is happening. So that's what I mean by credible perspective. Secondly, count the number of emotional words in a headline and lead, like we did in those first couple of slides that I showed. That's a really quick way. There's also a few phrases you'll see, like, you won't believe this. The news media won't tell you this. That's a really popular one. And then 3, just breathe and wait. Allow the emotional reaction to pass so that your rational thinking, your more critical processing can kick in. And 9 times out of 10, if you pause and wait and allow yourself to think unemotionally but critically, it will save the spreading mis and disinformation. One of the things we're confronting this election season in particular is AI. It's certainly a factor when it comes to the bottom element of this list, which is deep fakes. Deep fakes are videos that are manipulated either visually or through the audio. It can also be a still photo that's been, again, manipulated or completely assembled from online images. And they look real, and some of them are quite sophisticated. So of course the concern is this candidate really saying this, or am I seeing a deep fake? And we'll look at tools at the end to check that. But one, just if it helps you to just put the two together right now, Amnesty International has something called a data viewer And you can put in the URL of a video, and it will let you know where that video has shown up in the past. Another clue for deepfake images is looking for inconsistencies. Some real telltale signs will be hair. It looks sort of like a helmet, earrings or that don't match, or glasses that don't quite line up. Things look a little out of alignment. If you remember the recent picture that was photoshopped by oh my gosh, I'm gonna blank out on the princess, Catherine, right?
Princess Kate.
Thanks. Yep, and she had done her own photoshopping to, and her hand was sort of, her wrist was in half, and she had so sometimes they can get pretty telltale pretty quickly. Attacks on honest information, partly come from algorithms, because we all know that algorithms are formulas that answer the question, what is this person going to look at? Like, what am I going to serve Sue Ellen in her feed today, says this social media platform? That's the question that the algorithm is trying to answer. That's its problem, and its solution is to rely on what I have looked at, liked, and spent time with previously, which is where we get this idea of that we're living in a filter bubble, because we get a lot of the same thing if we don't read widely in a lot of different publications and outlets. Two that I would recommend are allsides.com and Verity. Verity is a phone app as well that is called Verity. It's been rebranded. Its URL is improvethenews.org. In both these cases, particularly All Sides, is here's a right, left, and center take from evidence-based news media, and it's on a major topic. It's on a major event. It's a handy way to read widely and to try and ensure that you aren't falling into the trap of one particular perspective on the world. One of the problems with that we're facing regarding attacks on honest information are conspiracy theories. And the reason that they are just like a dog that won't let go of its bone is because you cannot disprove a conspiracy theory. They are always cloaked in secrecy. There is a master plan that nobody has, nobody is privy to. And the folks who hold tightly to conspiracy theories, in particular, are seeking certainty in uncertain times. And we certainly are living in uncertain times. And again, this is where the empathy factor helps a great deal in talking with someone who believes strongly in a conspiracy theory. There is, I'm an advocate for, and there are discussions about doing more to inoculate citizens towards mis and disinformation and conspiracy theories. The idea being, let's give more media literacy up front. Let's give the tools up front. When you're aware that you might be fooled, and here's what you do, that is a great way to prevent the conspiracy theory from really taking hold. It's pretty hard to debunk a conspiracy theory once it's taken hold. Research shows it's far more effective to try and give folks the skills and the critical thinking before the conspiracy theory takes hold. And lastly, I wanted to just mention this concept called the liar's dividend. And we see politicians use it all the time. And that is to avoid accountability for something that they legitimately did, that a politician, in this example, legitimately did. They say, well, you can't trust that news source, fake news. None of us know what's real anymore. And they play into the information chaos. They play into the mis and disinformation and the distrust in honest news information. That's the liar's dividend. So that by calling into question honest news, it gives the
Yeah.
idea that there's nothing you can trust.
Smart.
I mentioned the term media literacy, and want to make sure that we all are on the same page with what it means. Access, analyze, evaluate, and create media in a variety of forms, because all of us are also, we are posting, we are sharing information. So we're not just the recipients, but we also all are the creators of media, whether it's images, text, audio, video. I wanted to show you a resource that I hope you'll share widely. In many of your communities, it's coming to a library near you if it's not already there. WonderMediaLibrary.com is the media and news literacy website that I created the content for. And it is based on a museum exhibit that I created after writing my book. I really wanted to get the information out to a variety of the public, and not just folks in my classes, and not just people who read textbooks. And so that's what led me to creating the 14-element museum exhibit that, when it finished its run of 21 months, 37,000 people had visited. And it's very expensive to tour a media exhibit, and that only goes to one museum at a time. So we created this website, and it's free and it's online now. It's also on your phone, available on your phones. And as you can see, it has two different elements: news literacy and media literacy. And there's a variety of games, tools, information for ages 10 and older. And I really encourage you to share it with your communities and to spend some time on it yourself. It is not just for kids. It is not just for teens. There's something for everyone on it. And we've tried really hard to continue to keep it up to date and growing, and you know, adapting to people's needs. One of the things I hope to add in the next iteration is more content for people who are 65 and older, and really looking at some of the examples of the ways that seniors in our community are targeted, not just their privacy, but also with mis and disinformation in particular. That's my book. And I think it's a fun read. And some of the highlights from that book, and also pertinent to our discussion today, are the following. Trying to be real action-oriented for all of us, so that when you are confronted with information, you're not sure, do I trust this or not? We've talked about checking the headline. And one of the most important statistics is a vast majority of people who share a news article share it based on the headline, and they never read the story. And take the time, if you think it's worth sharing, then take the time to actually read the story, and make sure that you're not being duped by a shocking headline that then basically it's just a spoof. Checking the author, just looking for the byline. Is there a by so-and-so? Did someone actually write this article? And if they did, if I click on them, does it take me to a real person that I can find as having written other articles as well? Always checking that it's a current issue or event, meaning just triple checking. What am I looking at right now? Is this, partly, is it repurposed? Is this an image that has been, we saw this with, especially early on with the Ukraine war, and that is images from prior conflicts being used to depict supposedly something that was just happening that day. So checking that it's actually has currency. As in our second example that we looked at, is it satire? Is it a joke? Lateral reading is your best friend, and it is what all fact checkers do immediately, which is they go off the site where the news or questionable information originated. Go off the site and look at what fact check, let's see, it's fact check media bias fact check, sorry, mediabiasfactcheck.org is one organization, and All Sides also does it. It'll let you know if this news organization does evidence-based reporting. Is it generally seen as fair and neutral? It'll just quick give you some information about the site itself. Also, by going off of a site and doing lateral reading, it helps you to see if other reputable news organizations are covering this story. And if they're not, that should tell you something. Checking your biases, do you believe it because you agree with it? It gets at that emotional element that we talked about earlier. Counting, are all the sides presented? Is there context that is making a good faith effort? And particularly what we see is in an election year, what we have to be careful of on things like election night or on primary night where breaking news is happening, there's a sense of urgency. And so honest news organizations will be putting up information as soon as they get it. And those that are careful will say, here's what we know, and here is what we do not know. And that is essential when it comes to fast-moving news stories. So check the context. Is the context that we're giving you information in layers and in bits and pieces because this is a breaking story and we know you want information? So are all sides presented? Maybe not in those initial stories. And it's really important. You'll know an organization, a news outlet is trusted when it goes back, recaps, fills in the gaps, and also takes accountability for the things that it got wrong on deadline. It lets you know, we had this wrong, we misunderstood this source, law enforcement thought this, but actually upon investigation, here's a corrected version. And then let's look at for a minute at reverse image search. Checking the image is one quick way. And as you saw in, again, our examples, a photo can be very compelling, and it's oftentimes what draws us to a post. So it can be a simple reverse image search on TinEye or Google Images, which I'll show you in just a minute, that will let you know where an image has appeared in the past and what is its origin. I also wanted to just show you this site so you could take a screenshot of it if you wanted to get some of these outlets on your phones and handy. So let's walk through a reverse image search. This is a scary, scary blue bird, and we are going to check it out. You drag the image, you click on the image and drag it to Google Images. And you get to Google Images by just going to Google, and there's a camera image. You click on that, so that lets Google know you're going to be searching an image and not text. And it tells you other appearances on the internet of visually similar images or that image itself. And here are the results. I picked a silly one just to as an example to demonstrate this. And what we see is obviously, this is a stock photo that's reused many times. If this were a different PowerPoint where we were looking specifically at visual disinformation, one of the things that we would do is learn about how we can tell from an image some clues. So if it says that it's happening in this particular city, we can zoom in on the image and look for street signs, for businesses, for car license plates, for signs on businesses that have the area code. These are all things that fact checkers use to determine pretty quickly, hey, you say that's in New York City. That's not in New York City. That's a 313 area code. And I see a sign for this particular business, and when I Googled it, it shows up in this city and not in New York City. Things like that. Before I go on, questions so far that and the last little chunks of content?
So Ellen, I have a question on that media literacy chart you had.
Sure, I'll go back to it.
In number 6, do you believe this because you agree with it? I think I see a lot of that on Facebook. In fact, I have a brother that he'll post things on Facebook that he doesn't create. He sees it from someone else, and then he has it on his Facebook page. And I know he believes it, even though it's not true, because it agrees with his thinking. Do you think that's true with a lot of people?
Confirmation bias has been shown again and again to be one of the drivers of mis and disinformation. I believe it because I agree with it, so I want to believe it. And it really, it clouds, it's one of those cognitive heuristics, confirmation bias, that not only are we motivated to reason our way into believing it, but also we literally seek out information that bolsters it. So again, that idea of reading widely, I too have people close to me in my life who really hoard information that they agree with. That's incredibly important to their sense that they can understand the world, and that generally folks who have a high degree of a need for certainty have a harder time with reading widely, have a harder time with ambiguity and thinking, we might not have the complete answer to this. It's not neat. And because of if you have a high need for certainty, you also tend to seek out things that you agree with. It makes your worldview a lot neater and tidier. I don't know that makes you feel any better, but what you are describing is something that's well documented in literature as the confirmation bias. And it's a strong bias. And it really takes someone deciding that they themselves want to work against it. It is hard to do from the outside.
Right.
Sue
Sue Ellen?
Yeah.
This is Marcia. Thank you. That's been very informative. I have a question. When it comes to these fact-checking organizations, how sure can we be that somebody hasn't hacked in and kind of taken over? I mean, is there anything that prevents that from happening?
That's a great question. Well, nothing is foolproof, but I can say that let's go back to that slide for just a minute. So some of the fact-checking websites, and again, there's many more beyond these 3 that I've listed, but just to get you started, I have a high degree of certainty that these are 3 sites that for years have fact-checked information and have done so consistently. I trust them. My complaint is that for us in Michigan, we have things happening locally, regionally, maybe statewide that never gets on their radar. And so we're left to our own devices, which is why I hope presentations like this can help to equip us to do some of our own fact checking, because they're not doing it for us, because it's local or regional, and it's just, we're too small of a fish to fry.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to just conclude with 2 last slides. One is the importance of, I hope I in this presentation that we are in a chaotic news environment and a chaotic information environment. And a whole nother discussion is whither has gone journalism and what's happening to it. But what I'd just like to say for this presentation is that local journalism is incredibly important to our democracy and to elections. And what we know is when a newspaper closes, when it shuts its doors, and if it is the only news outlet, if I recall correctly, which it's a newspaper, it has to be a newspaper in a city, fewer people run for mayor, fewer people come out to vote. That is direct implication for leagues throughout the nation. We need local, yeah, that is correct. So it's newspapers. Yep. Okay. We need local information in order to equip ourselves to make good decisions. And journalists are trained, professional journalists are trained in getting information, filing Freedom of Information Act requests, seeking as many points of view as possible on deadline sometimes. And I know that many people are really frustrated with their local newspaper. It's what we have, there's now a word for it. It's called a ghost newspaper, meaning it exists, but it is such a shell of its former self. It's a ghost of its former self. And that is because there's been such, let's go back to that other slide, so many news staffers have been laid off in these 20 years since we really started the digital information age, that news outlets that once had 40 reporters on staff now have 2, and it's for the same region. So there's lots of dependence on press releases. There's far less coverage on the what we would call, the civic affairs of a community, the things that are traditionally of watchdog journalism, which is what are our tax dollars funding? Our tax dollars are funding the schools, including the university in my community, libraries, and obviously the government, and all of the elements of infrastructure are in our community, the courts. And our history in journalism is, as journalists, we go and look at, what are you doing with the taxpayers' money, and prove it. And we just don't have the staff anymore to do that kind of robust reporting like I'm sure most of you on this call grew up with and relied upon. So I can't stress enough to support local journalism. It's really going to be hard to rebuild once it's gone. And I think it's a lot easier to make something robust while the structure is still there. I'm part of a collaborative, southwestmichiganjournalism.com, and it's a former competitors, and we're working together now to try and expand our reach. Bridge, Michigan just joined us. And I just encourage you to be aware of the importance of local news. It helps our democracy in so many important ways. And that's my presentation. I'm happy to take questions and talk more or follow up. There's my email. If you want to follow up individually, please feel free.
Thank you, Sue Ellen.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to, we just have a couple minutes if there's any last burning questions that people want to ask. I think I saw one in the chat from Judy Florian about how can we reassure people that those fact-checking websites are indeed giving legitimate information, and I don't know how one answers that.
Yeah, so I did touch on that a little bit. Oh, sure, I'll put that email address, Nicole, in here. I would go to the ones that have been around a long time and that I am seeing consistently debunking important stories. So I you know, the Snopes, the PolitiFacts, there's a whole list, of reputable fact-checking sites internationally. And the International Fact-Checking Network is another, resource for trusted fact-checking sites, International Fact-Checking Network. And then they track a variety of, fact checkers in different countries, including our own. So I would look for ones that had been around a while and, are just a one-off. It's
Great. Yeah. Anybody else have a last question you'd like to ask?
Will this presentation be available?
Yes, Sue Ellen has graciously agreed to let us record it, so we're recording it.
How about the PowerPoints and stuff? I've got people in my chapter that would probably benefit from some of the slides.
That would be up to Sue Ellen if she's willing to share. Maybe certain portions, maybe some key
yeah,
like
yeah,
checklists, maybe.
That one, yeah, the one that had the 9 things that you
Yeah.
should think about, and the one that had the websites that you could use to help check. That would be beneficial to the people in my my league.
can I provide them to you, Denise or Paula,
Yeah,
and
sure.
disseminate? Okay.
And thank you very much. This has been very informative.
Absolutely, you guys are, and but one last thing I would like to say is that misinformation and disinformation is in particular targeting communities of color, targeting communities of ESL, English as a second language. Sorry, I said learners because of my education background, but folks who are not native English speakers, and that's a whole nother constituency that we could spend a lot of time talking about, but I just really want to have you be heightened awareness of the importance of these groups to really being targeted in ways that are incredibly damaging and confusing. So just want to lift that up and acknowledge that reality is not the same for everybody, the struggle.
This is Wanda Harden from Flint. You know, you talked about Snopes, and I've used Snopes several times, especially if you're going through Facebook and you see something that just doesn't look right or feel right. I usually go over and fact check it, and I'll actually put the link back
That's
over
great.
in the Facebook post, trying to get people to understand that everything that they see is not true.
There you go.
Just because it's on, on Google or Wikipedia or Facebook, you still have to question and use your best judgment.
Well said.
Yeah. Thanks for being a good disinformation combating person there, Wanda. That's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much. We're at our hour. We really appreciate you, Sue Ellen, for this great information that you shared with us. And thanks everybody for joining us, and thanks for your good questions. And thanks for doing all the good work out in the community to help get the facts out there.
Keep the faith.
Yes.
Take care.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.